Hi, my name is Mohammed Layiq Sediqi, the father of Holophase, Episode 1, Life's 4 billion year question: What is real? Before we do anything else, I want to invite you into a very simple experiment. Wherever you are right now, pause for a moment. Notice your body, the contact with the chair, the bed, the floor. Notice whatever you can see: walls, sky, a screen, the small details around you. Notice the sound of my voice arriving in your awareness. You are here. There is a world. There is something rather than nothing. That obvious fact, the one we normally step over without thinking, is the starting point of everything we are going to do together. In this first episode, I am not going to throw equations at you. I am not going to demand any special background. Instead, I want to walk with you through a story you are already part of, whether you know it or not. It is the story of life on Earth, not as a nature documentary, but as a 4 billion year experiment in discovering what is real. Because before humans wrote equations, before telescopes and colliders and supercomputers, there was already a long, unbroken chain of testing going on. It began in the oceans, with simple molecules bumping into each other, and it has continued step after step all the way to you listening to this sentence. This experiment had a brutal grading system. Patterns that did not fit the real structure of the world were erased. Patterns that matched the real structure of the world survived, copied themselves, and slowly became more elaborate. Life in this story is not just a collection of organisms, it is the universe trying out patterns and seeing which ones the world allows to continue. And you, with your thoughts, your doubts, your curiosity, are one of those patterns. So in this episode, we are going to ask a question that sounds simple, but cuts all the way to the bone. What is real? Not in a poetic sense, but as a sharp scientific and existential question. What is the world made of? What is the basic stuff or the basic structure that everything else depends on? The Holophase model offers a very radical answer to that question. It says that the most basic thing is not little particles and not energy as a kind of invisible fluid and not even space and time themselves. Instead, it says that everything we can measure and talk about is a pattern in a single, continuous, cyclic field we call phi, the Holophase. That is a huge claim. In this series, we will not ask you to believe it. We will ask you to test it. And in this first episode, our job is to prepare the ground. We will treat life itself as our guide, and we will see how life has slowly built models of reality, layer by layer, until it arrived at our current picture, a world of energy in space-time. Then, we will gently open the possibility that this picture, as powerful as it is, might not be the final floor of the building. Let us start where the story really begins. The unbroken chain. Imagine you could rewind time, not just 100 years or 1,000 years, but billions of years back to a young Earth. No trees, no animals, no eyes, no brains. Just a hot planets, oceans, rocks, atmosphere, lightning, volcanoes. In that ancient ocean, chemistry is happening everywhere. Molecules collide, break, stick, fold, form droplets, fall apart again. Most of these arrangements are fleeting. They appear and then disappear, like tiny temporary sculptures in water. But among this chaos, something special begins to happen. A few arrangements of molecules accidentally find a way to do something crucial. They help make more copies of themselves. Maybe they form a little bubble that protects its contents from the outside environment. Maybe they speed up certain reactions that build parts of themselves faster. Whatever the exact details, the key point is this: some patterns begin to help produce more of the same pattern. Once that starts, the game changes. Now, the ocean is not just a place where molecules move randomly. It has become a place where certain patterns compete to persist. If a pattern is bad at surviving in the real conditions of that environment, it fades away. If a pattern is slightly better at surviving, or at making copies, or at stealing resources from its surroundings, it becomes a little more common. Over time, this competition becomes evolution. Notice what is really happening here. The Earth is not grading these patterns based on what they believe or what story they tell. It is grading them based on whether they work. Does this pattern allow matter and energy and structure to keep flowing in a loop that maintains itself? If yes, the pattern stays in the game. If no, it vanishes. From this point of view, life is a kind of ongoing test against the true structure of reality. The rules of the test are not written down anywhere. They are simply the actual behavior of the world. Gravity pulls in a certain way. Molecules interact in certain ways. Light behaves in certain ways. Temperature, pressure, chemistry, all of it sets the boundary conditions. Life does not need to know the equations for those rules. It just needs to stumble into patterns that fit them closely enough to survive. Every cell alive right now has passed this test, not once, but continuously, generation after generation, without a single break for billions of years. If that chain had broken even once, your line would have ended and you would not be here. So when you look in the mirror, you are looking at a structure that has been relentlessly calibrated against reality for 4 billion years. This is already our first deep insight. Life is not just living in the world. Life is learning what the world will tolerate. Life is an ontological filter, ontic filtering, how reality pushes back to make this idea concrete. Imagine two different designs for a simple creature. One creature has a body plan and a metabolism that assumes gravity pulls objects upward. Its sensory and motor system is tuned to that imaginary rule. When it jumps, it expects to drift away from the planet. Its balance system fires when it feels itself falling toward space, and it relaxes when it is pressed toward the ground. The other creature has the opposite expectation. It is tuned to the actual rule. Gravity pulls downward. Its muscles and nerves work with that fact, not against it. Which lineage will survive? The answer is obvious. The one whose internal assumptions match the actual behavior of the world. The first lineage will die out very quickly if it ever appears at all. The second can persist and evolve. In reality, evolution does not build creatures that are quite that wrong. But it does constantly test details. If your visual system misjudges distance badly, you fall off cliffs and get eaten. If your metabolism misjudges how much energy is stored in food, you starve or explode. If your nervous system misjudges which patterns in the environment matter for survival, you waste energy on useless reactions or miss crucial threats. Across countless generations, reality leans on organisms. It pushes them into shapes that fit. We can think of this as an ontic sieve. Whatever does not match the real structure falls through the mesh and disappears. Whatever does match gets caught and continues. What matters for us is this. As organisms become more complex, they do not stop obeying this filter. They inherit it. Your brain, your senses, your intuitions about space and time and causality, all of them have been tuned by this long interaction. They are not perfectly accurate, but they are not random either. They are good enough pictures of the world to keep you alive. In that sense, your everyday experience is already a theory of reality, one that life has been testing for a very long time. But life does not stop at simple reflexes. The rise of models, from reflex to brain. At the beginning, life's knowledge of reality is built into its chemistry and structure. A bacterium does not sit there and think about the laws of physics. Its shape, its membrane, its enzymes, its tiny motors are themselves the result of trial and error against those laws. Over time, though, something new appears, nervous systems. Instead of having all your reactions hardwired into your body plan, you can start to have specialized cells that transmit signals, form networks, and change their connections based on experience. A primitive nervous system is like the first sketch of a map. Imagine a simple worm that lives in mud. It has sensors that detect chemicals in the water, maybe light and vibration. It has muscles it can contract to move forward or backward, curl up, or stretch out. At first, its nervous system may only encode a handful of simple rules. If light is very strong, move away. If there is a high concentration of a useful chemical, move toward it. If a certain pattern of vibration appears, freeze. These rules are still shaped by evolution, but now they exist as patterns in a network of cells, not just in the static structure of a protein or a membrane. As nervous systems grow more complex, they start doing something remarkable. They build internal models. Instead of reacting only to what is happening right now, they begin to predict. Think about a cat about to jump onto a ledge. Before it moves, it looks, checks the distance, adjusts its posture, and then leaps. Somewhere in its nervous system, a model of the world is running. If I push off with this much force from this position, I will land there. If the model is bad, it misses the ledge and falls. If the model is good, it lands gracefully. The better its model, the more dangerous and textured environments it can navigate. From the viewpoint of our ontic filter, this is a new layer. Now, the universe is not just filtering body plans and metabolisms. It is filtering internal representations. Brains that carry bad models of reality cause their owners to die more often. Brains that carry better models help their owners survive, mate, and pass on the wiring patterns that produce those models. Eventually, in some lineages, brains get large enough and flexible enough to do something extraordinary. They become capable of thinking about thinking. They can turn their models on themselves, and that is where creatures like us appear. Humans' life becomes explicit. You are not the first creature to have a map of the world in your head. Many animals clearly do. Birds navigate long distances, octopuses solve puzzles, apes use tools. All of them are running internal models that track parts of reality. What seems to be special about us is the degree to which we can reflect on those models, compare them, criticize them, and redesign them intentionally. We invent language. We invent symbols that can stand for things that are not present. We invent counting, geometry, stories about invisible agents, stories about invisible forces, and eventually stories about invisible fields and space-time. We no longer just carry models. We can write them down, share them, argue about them, and test them deliberately. At this point, life's 4 billion-year experiment takes on a new form. Instead of waiting for natural selection to slowly punish bad models, we start doing something like artificial selection on our own ideas. We build instruments, we set up experiments, we make predictions, we check whether they come true. We throw away ideas that fail and keep refining the ones that work. This is science. From the Holophase perspective, science is not alien to life. It is life's latest phase. It is what happens when a lineage of organisms evolves a nervous system that can inspect its own models, write them down, and deliberately test them. In that sense, you can view a physics lab as just another organ of the biosphere, one that is specialized for probing reality more precisely than claws or eyes can. Over the last few centuries, this scientific organ has discovered a lot. It has taken our informal, experience-based picture of the world and replaced it with a more precise picture. To our naked senses, the world looks like solid objects moving in a three-dimensional space, changing through time. To our scientific instruments, the world looks like something more subtle. We see fields, particles, forces, conserved quantities like energy and momentum, space-time curvature, quantum probabilities, entanglement. If you ask most educated people today what the world is really made of, they will say something like this. Fundamentally, there is space-time. In that space-time, there are quantum fields. Excitations of those fields are particles. These particles and fields carry energy and momentum. Everything else, atoms, chemistry, biology, is built from that. That story is our current default ontology. It is the best version so far of life's deep model of reality. It works astonishingly well. It explains almost everything we can test, from the behavior of atoms to the bending of light around galaxies. And yet, the Holophase program argues that this story, as good as it is not the last word. Not because it is wrong in its predictions, but because it might be misidentifying what is really fundamental. Before we can even begin to see that possibility, we have to understand the difference between two things: usefulness and ontic status. Maps, territories, and misplaced fundamentals. Think again of the cat jumping onto the ledge. The cat's brain carries a model of the world that is good enough for it to land where it wants to. That model uses certain internal variables, estimates of distance, body posture, muscle force, maybe something like a sense of trajectory. Those internal variables are incredibly useful to the cat. They are the right coordinates for its problem, but they are not necessarily the deepest description of reality. If you zoom down into the muscles and nerves and then further down into molecules and then into fields, you could describe the same jump in very different terms. Neither description is wrong. They are different maps of the same event, tailored to different purposes. Now imagine that the cat starts to believe something strange. It begins to think that distance and trajectory are not just useful concepts, but the actual ontic building blocks of the universe. It starts telling stories like, everything that exists is ultimately distance and trajectory. Muscles, gravity, time, they are all secondary. The true substance is pure trajectory, dancing in distance space. We would smile at that. We know that these are just parts of the cat's model, not God-given primitives. But as humans, we may be doing something similar. We have discovered that describing the world in terms of fields in space-time carrying energy and momentum is incredibly powerful. We have put those concepts at the center of our theories. We have built technology on them. They predict experiments with amazing accuracy. It is very tempting to say that must be what reality really is. Everything is energy in space-time. Full stop. The Holophase program agrees that energy in spacetime is an extremely good map. It does not deny the successes of relativity or quantum field theory. What it questions is whether energy and spacetime themselves are the final floor, or whether they are more like the cat's distance and trajectory. Brilliant coordinates, but still coordinates, still a choice of description. This is where life's long test becomes crucial again, because if we want to move beyond our current map, we have to do something very delicate. We must not throw away the parts of the map that have been proven by reality. We must not deny the things that have passed every experimental test we have thrown at them. At the same time, we must allow ourselves to ask whether some of the labels on that map are only labels, not the territory. It is like realizing that the lines on a city's subway map are not concrete tubes in the ground, but abstractions that help you navigate. They are indispensable for planning your journey. But if you started digging based on the thickness or color of those lines, you would quickly get confused. In physics, we risk something similar when we treat energy as a kind of mystical stuff or space-time as a literal fabric. Holophase says, maybe these are just thick colored lines on a deeper phase-based map. Maybe there is a more primitive description from which energy and space-time emerge, in the same way that distance and trajectory emerge from deeper dynamics in the cat's body. That primitive in our model is a single, continuous oscillatory field, a kind of universal rhythm that runs through everything. We call it phi, the holophase. In later episodes, we will unpack exactly what that means and how it connects mathematically and experimentally to what we already know. For now, I want to plant just one seed. If such a deeper description exists, it has to survive life's test. It has to be compatible with everything life has already learned about reality through evolution, through biology, through neuroscience, and through science itself. And it has to be falsifiable. Falsifiability, how to kill an idea, honestly. In this project, we are not asking you to replace one comforting story with another. We are asking you to take the scientific attitude all the way down. A scientific theory is not defined only by what it explains. It is defined by what would prove it wrong. If you cannot say what would count as a failure, you are not doing science, you are doing mythology. The holophase model is deliberately built to be killable. It says in plain language that all admissible physical observables can be expressed as functions of phi and its derivatives, on regions where phi is coherent enough to read. Energy, space-time, mass, charge, all of them are different ways of reading patterns in phi. If that is true, then we should in principle be able to do several things. We should be able to re-express every successful law of physics in phi language without losing predictive power. We should be able to design experiments where we measure phase directly, reconstruct phi, and show that all the usual quantities can indeed be recovered as encoders of phi. We should be able to find clear, testable constraints that come from treating phi as primary. For example, limits on certain combinations of measurements or relationships between different kinds of interference effects that would not be obvious in the energy and space-time picture. If, on the other hand, we discover a phenomenon that stubbornly resists being written this way, even when we have good, clean data, and even when we try every reasonable encoder, then holophase is in trouble. If we find that biology or neuroscience needs an extra ingredient, some ontic life force or mind stuff that cannot be expressed as patterns in phase, then holophase is in trouble. If we find that no single-phase field, however we dress it up, can reproduce the kinds of correlations we see in quantum experiments without cheating, then holophase is in trouble. That is the spirit in which we are working. We are not building an abstract philosophy. We are building a proposal that can be hammered by reality. If it survives, it earns the right to be taken seriously as a candidate for what is real. If it fails, it will have done its job by showing us where our intuitions were wrong and we will have to look elsewhere. scientific rigor without losing the human being. Before we finish, I want to talk directly to you about something that often goes wrong when we try to mix deep science with ordinary human life. Many people have been taught that scientific rigor means coldness. It means stripping away feelings, stories, images, anything that could make things easier to grasp. It means speaking in symbols that only a tiny group can read. It means leaving the human being at the door. On the other side, many people retreat into soft, comforting stories that feel human but have no way to be checked. They talk about energy in a vague, magical sense, or about the universe listening to their wishes, or about consciousness as a free-floating mist. These pictures may feel warm, but they are not anchored to anything testable. The Holophase project refuses both of these extremes. We want full scientific honesty and full human depth together. We want a picture of reality that could, in principle, be written down in sharp mathematical form, coded into algorithms, and beaten up by real experiments. At the same time, we want a picture of reality that you can feel in your bones, one that connects back to your actual experience of being alive. This is not just a matter of style. It matters for the content. If your picture of reality cannot, in the end, talk about experience, meaning, life, mind, without waving its hands, then it is incomplete. It might be a brilliant fragment, but it is not an ontology. If, on the other hand, your picture of reality cannot survive a controlled experiment, cannot say this outcome, not that one, cannot risk being wrong, then it is not an ontology either. It is a myth dressed up as insight. Holophase is an attempt to thread the needle. On one side, it has a very concrete backbone. It talks about a continuous phase field, phi, about how its local changes give rise to what we call time, space, and motion, about how its patterns encode what we call particles, forces, energy, information. On the other side, it never forgets that the beings doing this work are living systems, with nervous systems evolved to survive, with feelings, with questions about meaning and value. From the beginning, we place life and mind inside the same ontology as physics. We do not treat them as awkward afterthoughts. Why is this important to say here in the first episode? Because you might be wondering what role you personally can play in all this. You may not plan to run a phase retrieval experiment or to derive new equations. You may simply want to understand what this model says about the fact that you exist. That is already more than enough. When you listen carefully, when you test ideas against your own experience of the world, when you are willing to let an idea die if it fails its test, you are participating in the same deep attitude that Holophase is built on. You as an experimental site. There is another sense in which you are not just an observer of this story, but part of the lab. Your body, your brain, your perceptions, your decisions, your sense of time and space and self are all parts of reality that any serious ontology must eventually explain. In later episodes, when we talk about how time emerges from phase, or how information and memory can be expressed as patterns in PHI, or how awareness might be related to certain kinds of phase organization, we will be talking indirectly about you. But even now, in this opening episode, you can already begin to use your own experience as a kind of soft measurement device. When you notice the flow of time, you are sampling a regularity in how your internal dynamics change. When you move your hand through space, you are sampling a regularity in how your body and the world relate. When you remember something that happened yesterday, you are sampling the fact that patterns can be stabilized and brought back. Holophase does not want to erase these things. It wants to show how they might arise from a more primitive level without losing their reality. In fact, one of the strongest tests for any deep theory is whether it can connect the most abstract levels of description to the most intimate levels of experience. If a theory can describe black holes and particle colliders, but can say nothing that makes sense of a person feeling time, choosing, suffering, loving, then something is missing. Holophase is ambitious enough to try to bridge that gap. It starts with the hardest, cleanest, most objective parts of physics, because those are the places where reality has already said, yes, this works many times, but it does not intend to stop there. In the companion series focused on mind and meaning, We will bring phi into contact with questions about perception, consciousness, language, ethics, even spirituality. We will do it slowly and carefully, with as much rigor as the subject allows, always asking, what are the possible tests? What would count as failure? For now, it is enough to know that your own existence and your own questions are not side issues. They are part of what this model is trying to embrace. So as you listen to the rest of this introduction series, I invite you to keep two tracks running in parallel. On one track, follow the technical story, how life evolved, how science formed its models, how energy and space-time became our dominant ontology, how Holophase proposes a deeper phase-based substrate, and how it plans to test that claim. On the other track, keep checking in with your own experience. Ask yourself, if this picture is true, what does it say about what it feels like to be me? About the passage of time I sense right now? About the fact that I can hold several possibilities in mind and choose between them? About the way meaning seems to matter to me, even though standard physics does not have a variable for meaning? We will not answer all of that in this episode or even in this introductory series, but we will keep the door open. Because if we are really looking for what is real, we cannot amputate the part of reality that is doing the looking. Holophase is a proposal for the entire universe, from quantum fields to galaxies, from microbes to minds, written in terms of a single phase field and its patterns. If that proposal is right, then somewhere, hidden in the patterns of phi, there is a description of you listening to this, and of me speaking, and of the long chain of life that made both of us possible. And whether or not Holophase survives, that fact alone, that reality has produced beings capable of asking what it is, remains one of the deepest clues we have. Life as a companion and a critic. Let us return one last time in this episode to life as our guide. When you look at a bacterium swimming up a sugar gradient, or a plant turning its leaves toward the light, or a bird navigating by the stars, you are seeing different ways that phi, whatever it ultimately is, has learned to talk to itself. Each organism is an arrangement that has survived reality's pressure. Each nervous system is a way of encoding aspects of the world. Each scientific instrument is an extension of those nervous systems, reaching deeper into the structure of things. The Holophase model claims that underneath all of those encodings, there is a single continuous phase field whose patterns they are sampling. If that is true, then life has been a 4 billion year attempted measurement of phi. It has not used that word, of course. It has not known the equations. But it has been, in practice, exploring the space of patterns that work in this universe. The fact that you are here, able to listen, able to think, able to doubt, means that a very long series of guesses about reality have been sufficiently good to survive. In the next episodes, we will begin to unpack the current official guess, the energy in space-time story. We will see how it grew out of earlier ways of understanding the world, where it is breathtakingly successful, and where quiet cracks appear if we look closely. Then, slowly, we will introduce the holophase itself, not as a mystical alternative, but as a more careful way of spelling out what our best experiments have actually been telling us all along. For now, I will leave you with a simple suggestion. At some point today, perhaps when you are outside or looking at your own hand or watching another person move, pause for a moment and ask yourself, what has this had to learn about the real structure of the world in order to exist? What did it have to get right about gravity, about chemistry, about light, about time, just to be here in front of me? And then, one layer deeper. What if all of those right guesses are not about things in space, but about patterns in a single universal rhythm? You do not need to answer that now. Just hold the question gently. Because in this series, we are going to follow that question all the way down until the familiar picture of energy in space-time starts to look like one of many talented maps, and the holophase steps forward as a candidate for the territory itself. And as we do, we will keep life by our side, as both companion and critic, insisting that whatever picture we draw is not just beautiful in our heads, but able to survive the same relentless test that everything living has always faced. Does it fit the real world, or does reality erase it? If holophase is real, it will have to pass that test. If it does not, reality will erase it too. And that, in the end, is the most honest way we can honor both science and life. Thank you for walking this first step of inquiry together here.